In this video, we're going to be covering picking equipment for your dog. And for tugs, this is where I am actually the pickiest. There's a lot of different tug toys out there. And I think once you have a dog that has a developed out or drop, and you've developed the structure of the game, you can use a lot of different toys to play tug. So there really isn't a pickiness there. I encourage owners expose their dogs to a lot of different types of material. There is a thing called equipment bias. And so the more things that our dog is used to playing with, the more likely that they will take to the different pieces of equipment. But we'll start with puppies. When I pick tugs for puppies, what am I going to choose? Typically, at this stage in the game, I have two main goals: to develop drive and desire in the game so that I can use that for motivation and training later on. My second goal is to develop the out. So for puppies, I want something very soft, very fluffy with a lot of give, okay? So that there is that tug action. The more action that's at play, the more movement in that toy, the more the dog's going to really drive into it and the more rewarding it's going to be. So I like things like car chamois. For protection dogs, we'll often use leather rags or burlap sacks, okay? But I like a good jute tug. I like a good fluffy fleece tug. I like to expose my puppy to like a rubber tug. And I like to expose puppies to something like a braided micro fleece, okay? These can be done on a flirt pole. A lot of the time with puppies, I'll put it on a line so that whether that's paracord or whether I hook a leash to it, this way I can get the puppy really chasing it, hunting, so we're fulfilling that chase behavior, okay? We're fulfilling that desire to hunt and then catch and fight, okay? And so with a flirt pole, which I'll show, or some of these fluffy tugs, a lot of time I can create a lot of movement. And my goal is to get the puppy targeting the fluffiest part of that, not the handle. So this can sometimes be a little bit challenging at first. We want to make getting that big fluffy part or that big chunky part of the tug rewarding, not necessarily the handles, okay? And the reason we want to avoid presenting the dog with handles more often than not is that if we start getting our puppy to play with the ends of the tug, then if we ever are going to present the tug appropriately, it's likely that we're going to get our hands chewed on, bit by accident, things like that. So we want to make sure that we're creating clear presentations. I'm not, when I move the tug, I want it to come straight back. I don't want it to like twist, because if you can see, when I go to twist, what's the puppy going to target? It's going to hit my hand. And I can't blame the puppy if they don't have great targeting, great aim or coordination at this point, if their teeth hit my hand. I really just can't. So we want to make sure we're grading good presentations and we're setting the puppy up for success. So I'm going to show a couple of those puppy tugs now, and then we'll move on. Now, as our puppy starts to take more interest in tugs and they started to develop that drive, for our puppy, once again, we're probably going to let them win a lot. We want them to get really excited about that, but I'm also going to set the puppy up to chase me. I'll probably run away, act excited, get the puppy to come back in and want to play some more tug with me, but I want them to be really, really successful. At the end of the game, typically, I like to take a little bit of treat or kibble. I might say, all done, put down that little bit of kibble or treat, take my tug, and I'm going to put it away. So considerations that we just want with the puppy. That idea of saying all done and putting that tug away is really important. I do not leave tugs out because your dog is likely going to go to that next sequence of now I'm going to tear it up and ingest it, okay? And so tugs are not, once again, self-play toys for me by any means. And they also create a lot of value. I don't want to create possessiveness to the tug. I want to manage how I present the tug and how I give access to that resource. Now, For dogs that are now tugging, getting into it, probably while we're still on that fleece tug or we're still on that fluffy tug, I am going to start freezing that tug up. Both hands as close to the mouth as possible, very calmly, just waiting until the puppy lets go and gets bored with the lack of movement. And then I'm going to, as soon as they let go, say beep, and I'm going to make that tug flutter again and get the puppy chasing it. But I really want to encourage my puppy. I want this to be a cooperative game. This is not at first a competition. This is like, hey, bringing the tug back to me makes this game fun. Okay. In the next section of this video, I'm going to go ahead and cover tugs that we may progress to. So for a lot of dogs, just something to consider during that teething stage. I'm probably not going to be playing a lot of tug because there is a lot of sensitivity and I don't want to add any conflict to that. But as our puppy comes out of that teething stage, we're going to have a stronger dog. We're going to have a dog that maybe has more drives and is starting to be more resilient in their game and maybe is holding off on letting go sometimes, hopefully not too much. But now we have this issue that the dog is stronger, and the more movement that's in the tug, so the more flexible it is, the less stiff it is, the more likely our puppy is going to start getting harder to get them to out, and the less we can control that tug, especially if the puppy is, once again, a large. So at this point, we're going to a shorter tug. We're going to be going to a more stiff tug. And this is where we commonly are going to run into our jute or our French linen or our fire hose. So these are usually our next steps up in tugs. If we're getting a more powerful dog, that could be anywhere from 6 months to a year, depending on your dog. And at this point, the game's already developed, right? The dog's already into it. They're tugging voraciously. They're very motivated by it. And we've already taught our out and our structure. So now it's just following through. And so here's where I'm going to move into, once again, French linen, jute, fire hose. So French linen and jute, depending on how stiff they are. There's a lot of great companies out there, Redline Canine. You can get Leerburg, Leerburg.com has some great reviews on different tugs and what I might choose for different purposes. And so typically we're going to go to shorter tugs. For a lot of the dogs that I'm seeing targeting the handles or the ends, I might even be cutting off the handles just so that there's less movement. If you think about where the dog wants to bite, it's where the movement is. So we want to create the movement in the center of the tug, not necessarily on the ends. Okay, I'm going to show a couple of those tugs. It's going to go jute, French linen, and then fire hose. Fire hose is going to be, or a rolled leather tug. If it's got a little bit of play, depends. We would say this is an intermediate tug. These are kind of the progressions I'll move up. So as we get up to fire hose and rolled leather or flat leather, there's going to be a little bit easier tendency to get it out because there's less play in the tug. And once again, we've gone to a shorter tug. So just some things to hit on. I'm going to show those before we go on. In this last part of the video, we're going to talk about the dogs that have either developed bad habits from not being exposed to teaching the out or structure in our tug play early on. Thanks, buddy. Or that we're going to be dealing with dogs that have such powerful grips or have become so powerful that maybe they figured out they can kind of take advantage of that. And so when we get into those types of dogs, a lot of the time these are once again power breeds, dogs with potentials for protection, those kind of things that we might choose for those purposes, or bully breeds. This is where I'm going to be much more likely to go towards my harder tugs. So a rolled jute tug, I'm going to show here in just a second, is going to be one option. It's just woven very tightly. It's small. There's not as much give in it. So for teaching the out, for a dog that's difficult to teach the out, it's going to be really handy. This is going to be a step up from most fire hose tugs. We can also move to a harder leather tug. I'm going to show one of those next as well. So Just some things to kind of keep in mind when you're choosing your tug. They all have different purposes. And so I'm going to show those tugs, and then I'm going to talk about the tugs that I personally avoid and why, and kind of how I view those. Right. So this is the last section we're going to cover in other tugs. Now, remember, all puppies are different, all dogs are different. So these are some just basic pieces of advice that I can give when people are trying to develop an appropriate game of tug with their dog. And it's just about knowing bite strength, it's about knowing veracity, it's about knowing your dog's genetics and motivations. Once again, the game that you have created with your dog. I'm going to hit on this last bit of the tug that I don't personally like to play with. And this is probably the kind of tug that you see the most marketed out there for pets. This is going to be the standard rope tug, or what we would call the floss tug. And I'll show that in just a second. So the floss tug for me has a very different purpose. The reason I don't like it, the ends have all the fluff, right? So all that fluff and whatnot is going to attract the dog to want to get to the end. And on the end, it's going to be more likely to get a chewing motion. So when we're playing tug, we're not trying to have the dog get it. I mean, you can have a dog that gets it to the back of their mouth, but typically gripping is done with the middle of their mouth. Chewing is at the back of the mouth, okay? So a lot of dogs want to come up and grab the tug and right off to the side, and this is typically going to be where we'll get chewing, where the dog's trying to self-satisfy, and the dog's not going to be as much into the cooperative game as, once again, self-satisfaction, chewing, those kind of things, which we're going to potentially get a little bit more into the question of, are we going to get into that area of resource guarding possession, or the dog not seeing us part of it. Now, are floss tugs bad or rope tugs bad? Absolutely not. If you have a really solid game, I have no problem with that. But if you usually see them, they typically are either longer than they should be, so there's a lot of motion. It's kind of hard to teach the dog to do an out initially with them. Once again, an experienced dog with a wonderful out, no problem with that. Two, we often see the dental floss tugs, even if they are shorter. One of the things that we see is it tends to create a chewing motion, all right? And so when we have tug like a floss, where I use them is I actually soak them in water, throw them in the freezer when I have a teething puppy, right? And the puppy can kind of like gnaw on that, and it kind of soothe that pain, kind of numb that pain. And that's how I use a rope tug. It's like I have no interest in it. I freeze it. I'm gonna let you use it for teething purposes. And then I just make sure that I'm always supervising, getting rid of it if the strings start to come off, because while it's unlikely those strings are going to be hugely problematic in the digestive system, let's be honest, the last thing I want is obstructions. So that's going to be the end of choosing our tug. Once again, I'll show a rope tug here. I hope this was helpful.